Hello everyone, Father Brett here. Welcome to Sermon Prep. This Sunday we are going to celebrate the solemnity of the Assumption of the Blessed Virgin Mary. So not the 20th Sunday of Ordinary Time. It's a great feast. It's a special feast for us here in South Africa because it is our Patronal feast day. And so an opportunity for us to bring before Our Lady our country and its many, many problems and challenges, and ask Our Lady to pray for us, to pray to her Son for all the people of our country, that we will live in harmony, that there will be a reduction in crime, that there will be a reduction in corruption, and that our government will be at the service of all people. And of course, it would be really nice if Our Lady could sort out the load shedding trouble for us, hey? So, the solemnity of the Assumption of Mary. Let's look at the readings for this great feast. You will see that there is a vigil mass for the evening before, but we will focus on the readings for the day, the mass during the day. And so, the first reading is taken from the book of Revelation, chapter 11, verse 19, and then chapter 12, verses 1 to 6, and then verse 10. The psalm is Psalm 45. The second reading is taken from St. Paul's first letter to the Corinthians, chapter 15, verses 20 to 27. And the gospel is taken from St. Luke's narrative section of his Gospel, chapter 1, verses 39 to 56. I usually start by looking at the Gospel, but can we start with the first reading from the book of Revelation this week? So the idea is of this really incredible vision of this woman clothed with the sun, and she is standing on the evil snake. She's got stars as a crown. We know that vision. We've seen pictures of it. We've seen statues depicting Our Lady like this. Was it Our Lady or was it Eve? What was the writer? Who did he have in mind? It was probably not Our Lady, but Eve or the church. And that's where Our Lady comes in. Mary is the new Eve. Mary is the symbol for the church. So even though perhaps the writer of Revelation did not imagine this to be Mary, the mother of Jesus, standing clothed at the sun with a crown of 12 stars and her foot on the snake, the evil serpent. Whether he thought that was Mary or not doesn't really matter, because Mary is for us a symbol of the church. And pretty sure that for the author that was the church, that the church would conquer the evil, and that it would be raised up, that it would shine brilliantly in the world. And so, yeah, I think we can see that same symbol, that same image would apply to Mary as well. Okay, really important. The snake, the evil, the serpent that she's got her foot on, maybe for the writer of the book of Revelation, the person seeing this image, this vision, perhaps the snake, the evil one, was the Roman Empire. But I think it can apply also to any evil, bad force that it is conquered when there is a real trust and a real hope in the promises of God. Okay. The Psalm 45, it's a beautiful psalm. The daughters of kings are those whom you favor. On your right stands the queen in gold of Ophir. So this is what we call a bridal or a wedding psalm. So it, again, doesn't apply directly to Mary. It would have been sung, it would have been prayed and chanted at wedding feasts. And so it is a psalm of rejoicing, a psalm of hope, a psalm of new beginnings. And I think that fits in really well with the first reading from the book of Revelation. The second reading from St. Paul's first letter to the Corinthians speaks of first fruits. And so our mind is taken to harvest time. And if we were in the northern hemisphere, it would be approaching harvest time. Summer is at its peak really now in the northern hemisphere. And so harvest is coming. And so the image that St. Paul is using here about Jesus is that at the end of time, at harvest time, we will be the harvest of God. All of us who have believed will be gathered up. And what is the guarantee that we will be gathered up? The resurrection. We'll be gathered into the resurrection of Jesus. And it's interesting that this feast of the Assumption of Our Lady is in the Northern Hemisphere's harvest or summertime. Easter happens for them in spring, the resurrection. For us, that's more harvest time, autumn. But the Assumption sort of reminds the people of the Northern Hemisphere of the resurrection that took place in springtime. And when everything is made right, then all of us will be harvested. And Mary is the example of that. Okay, so there's that image of the harvest. I think that's really powerful for especially for those living in the northern hemisphere. But that image of first fruits and harvest, it sort of changes a little bit at in the last two verses of that reading. And we get this idea of power and conquering evil, which again sort of echoes the first reading about Mary or the church overcoming evil, standing on the serpent. And so here it says, for he must reign until he has put all his enemies under his feet. And the last enemy to be destroyed is death. Okay, so you get the sense not of harvest, but of war and power and conquering, and that all evil is subject to God, subject to the church that is renewed at harvest time, at the time of the final resurrection. I think you can see how it all fits in there. Okay, so now we come to the Gospel, St. Luke's narrative account. What's happening in the narrative accounts? It's important for us to remember that these Gospels were written long after Jesus died. They were not blow-by-blow accounts. So nobody was sitting there, writing down, and Mary has given birth to Jesus, and now she's washing him and putting him in the manger. And here's some shepherds visiting. That's not how it happened. So they are reflections based on the risen Jesus. So Jesus is risen. They know that. They think, wow, this is incredible. So what can we say about his birth? What can we say about the events leading up to his birth? And so the infancy accounts, the infancy narratives are reflections based on the resurrection of Jesus. Okay, that's really important for us to keep in mind. So this, in the light of this feast of the Assumption of Mary, what would we reflect? I think clearly there is a sense of joy and rejoicing. There's also a sense of hope, and maybe the joy and rejoicing comes because of the hope. And what is the hope? That all things will come together under the reign of God, and all those bad, evil forces will be subject to God, the God who is the God of life and joy and peace and reconciliation. And it's Jesus that achieves this. It's God working through Mary, through other people, that the new Jerusalem comes about. Obviously, this is Mary's Magnificat, and it's full of Old Testament images and quotes. So anybody in the time of Jesus, any Jew reading this will say, wow, this clearly has links to the Old Testament. Okay. I think right before the Magnificat, though, Mary has gone to visit Elizabeth, of course, and Elizabeth exclaims, "Blessed are you among women, and blessed is the fruit of your womb." And then she says, "The child in my womb leapt for joy." Well, we know that's John the Baptist leaping for joy. He's the precursor, isn't he? He announces Jesus. Prepare the way for the Lord. Make straight his paths in the wilderness. We know that. Those are Advent readings for us. Even in the womb, he recognizes Jesus and he leaps for joy. But there are echoes of Old Testament there. You remember that in the time of Isaiah, Isaiah tells us in chapter 35, verse 6, "The lame shall leap like a deer." So even the frail will jump up and rejoice. Even babies in the womb jump up and rejoice at the coming of the Messiah. Of course, we know there's another leaping and dancing for joy in the Old Testament. Do you remember? King David leaping for joy as the Ark of the Covenant is brought into the city of David. We remember that, and his wife was embarrassed watching him. Okay, so even King David leapt before the Lord. John the Baptist leaps before the Lord. The lame leap before the Lord. So when Elizabeth says that even the baby leapt for joy, she's indicating that there's something really special in Mary. She is the Ark of the Covenant. And that's one of the titles given to Our Lady, isn't it? She's the new Ark of the Covenant. She brings forth the presence of God in our world. So there's rich symbolism in all these readings. And Mary is the focus, yes, but we must see that Mary is a symbol of the church, the new people of God. She also is a symbol of the Ark, the covenant, and that she is the new Eve. And I think those are important images, titles for us to reflect on this solemnity of the Assumption. Perhaps just to share with you why we celebrate the solemnity of the Assumption. It's a reasonably, for the Catholic Church, it's a reasonably modern feast because it's a modern dogma of the Church. And so I thought it might be good just to quote from the Catechism of the Catholic Church about the Assumption. It's Article 966. The Immaculate Virgin preserved free from all stain of original sin, when the course of her earthly life was finished, was taken up, body and soul, into heavenly glory, and exalted by the Lord as Queen over all things, so that she might be more fully conformed to her Son, the Lord of Lords and conqueror of sin and death. The Assumption of the Blessed Virgin is a singular participation in her Son's resurrection and an anticipation of the resurrection of other Christians. And so that's why Mary's a symbol for the church. What happened to Jesus will happen to all Christians, will happen to the church. It has happened to Mary already. So what Mary has had happen to her will happen to us. And why did this happen to Mary? Because she was the mother of Jesus. Because Jesus was raised from the dead, so she has been. But hers has happened earlier because she is obviously the mother of the Lord. And so this feast is a feast of hope, a feast of looking forward to the harvest and what will happen when we are all brought into the resurrection of Jesus. But it's also a feast that looks back to springtime, to Jesus' resurrection. Good. So, I hope those thoughts help. Again, I won't be preaching this week. Father Malusi will be here to say goodbye to us. So he'll be at the masses and he will be preaching. I'm sure he'll preach well, hey? So the 7 a.m. Mass will be live streamed. If you can't join us, I hope you'll join us online. But I hope there'll be lots of people at the 9 a.m. Mass and the reception and the celebration afterwards to thank Father Malusi for his ministry. We look forward to seeing you. God bless everyone. Bye-bye.